And I want to introduce somebody today that's going to bring just a powerful word, I believe, today from the Lord. And so go ahead and just open your heart up, if it isn't already, to receive what the Lord has to say today. Christian J is going to be speaking this morning, and I have been pumped about this for as long as I've known it was going to happen. Let me tell you a little bit about Christian. Christian and Addison, his wife, these guys showed up at the dwelling a few months ago. What, like Easter? I think like Easter Sunday was your first Sunday. And just immediately they're family, aren't they? If you know them, it's hard not to love them. Can I get a witness? Like, just love these guys. And I've been able to spend some time with Christian over the last few months, and just through our conversations, I just want to honor him just a minute and just tell you what I've learned. Christian J loves Jesus. Christian J is humble. He's one of the most humble guys I've ever met. Christian J has a heart for this city. It was interesting just in the first conversation we ever sat down and had coffee. It's like some of the things that he sees about this city are the things I wrote in my journal back in 2015, 16. And just the heart for what God wants to do, specifically the assignment, I believe, is on this house, the dwelling for what God wants to do in this city. These guys carry that and did before they even got here. Isn't that cool? And so that's just really neat to me and really special. So go ahead. If you want to just get on your feet, welcome up, Christian. Come on. So excited to hear what God has to say through you.
Good morning, guys. What's up? What's up? Y'all doing good? Awesome. Hey, I am beyond excited to be here this morning. This is awesome. Also, what is our worship team? Every week, I'm like, these guys are better and better and better, and they always blow me away. And I think it's just so incredible that we have that culture coming from this house. And so this morning, if we haven't met, by the way, too, and you're just like, who is this guy up here? Why is he wearing denim in July? Like all those things. My name's Christian, like Gunnar said, and I'm usually not up here. I usually get to serve on the worship media team doing some video stuff. So if this is your first time here this week and you're like, dude, we walked in, the people were phenomenally nice, the worship was incredible, everything was so perfect. The guy speaking, just come back next week. I won't be up here. Somebody else will be up here. So it'll be good. And if you have any complaints, you can direct them to me. My email is gunter@dwellingchurch.com. Real quick, though, while I have a second, I did want to just kind of honor this house because my wife, Addison, and I, like Gunnar said, came here a few months ago, and we love this place. It's been a place, like the word that comes to mind when I think about this place is what God has been able to do here through us is just replenish us. You know, like it's almost as if we ran a marathon. I say as if because I'll never run a marathon, but I can imagine hypothetically what it would look like to run a marathon. And you ever see the videos at the end of the marathon where there's like the people waiting at the end with like the ice cold bottles of water. They got like a tent and they got you a little chair under the tent. Like that is what the dwelling has been for us. It's been a place for us to just kind of rest and recharge. And so we couldn't be more thankful for this church that in a very short amount of time has really like become family. Like we love you guys so much. And it kind of seems like, and me and Addison have so many conversations, that God is just, there's something special happening in this house. And I don't know if God's building and preparing to release something, but I just want to say, as for me and my house, okay, we are here for it. We love this place. So just from us to you guys, thank y'all for allowing us a place and a space to just, to regain our footing a little bit. So this morning, if you are just jumping in with us today, over the last few months, we've been in this this series called The Way. And at the core of this series is it's really a discipleship series, right? We've been calling it The Way. This is really we are just looking at Jesus's life and learning what discipleship looks like. And it's been a process. This has been kind of the process we've learned. It starts with being with him. It starts with becoming like him. and then it's doing what he did. And so when we started this thing a few months ago, we started with being. This is when we are with him, when we encounter him, we come to know him and our identity. Proximity to him is the only way we can have proximity to who we really are. And so the being part actually informs the other two. So we sat there for a while. If you were here, I thought we were never going to be out of being and move on to the other ones. But it kind of informs the other two because it's a flow. It's a process. We also have kind of seen like we can't stay in one either, right? Like it's a moving thing. If we just stayed in the encounter part, we would never realize that God is actually wanting not just to meet us and leave us, but to meet us and then transform us to become like him and then invite us in to what he is currently doing. So currently we're in this middle one. We're in the becoming, the being transformed, and we're looking at the life of Jesus, and we're trying to pull out the characteristics, the attributes, the rhythms, and the values of Jesus' life and trying to kind of align ours with his. So that's kind of where we are if you're coming in this morning. Jesus is identified all throughout the New Testament as a teacher of wisdom. From a faith perspective, but even from a historical perspective, Jesus is objectively viewed as this teacher of wisdom. And Jesus' wisdom was a little different. Like the Bible even differentiates a little bit between like Jesus' wisdom and what he says, and then like what the teachers of the law says, what the culture says, what those wisdom teachers say. In Mark 1, it says that Jesus was one, or he taught as one who had authority. So there was something identifiably different about the wisdom that Jesus was walking in. And so that's what we're going to attempt to examine today is kingdom wisdom. So let me go ahead and put out a disclaimer. I am highly unqualified to talk about wisdom, okay? Like not even close. I'm not an authority on wisdom or anything like that. But I will say like this is something God has just been putting in my heart and stirring up over this last year. Just this desire to know his wisdom, because if we're called to invade this earth with the kingdom of heaven, then we have to get that kingdom wisdom deep down in us to be able to navigate. So put on your proverbial seatbelts because here we go. We're just going to do this thing. Title for this one, if you're one of those people that have to have a title, you can't function for the rest of the time without one. The way of wisdom, what, how, and why. And so hopefully by the end, we will have explored these three questions. What is kingdom wisdom? How do we walk in kingdom wisdom? And why do we need it? Turn to your neighbor and say, wisdom. Turn to your other neighbor, your second choice for whatever reason, and say, I need some of that. All right. Some of y'all just caught on that you're the second choice for somebody. I want to start here. I want to start with what is wisdom, because I think it just kind of gives us a framework to build from. Like we need to identify what we're going to be able to walk in and then why we need to walk into it. So, and there's so much on wisdom, like the Old Testament, the New Testament. There's actually 5 entire wisdom literature books in the Bible. So from the Old Testament to the New Testament, there's a lot on this thing. So I'm going to try to move fast through this first one because I just want to kind of give us a framework and kind of see what Scripture says about wisdom and what it is. And so we're going to jump from Old Testament to New Testament. Going to be a little bit of a Bible study. If y'all cool with that, say, come on. All right, let's look at Proverbs 8 real fast. Proverbs is one of those wisdom literature books, right? It's one of the 5. And so in Proverbs, it's this collection of sayings and instruction to give or advice on instruction for wise living. That's what Proverbs is. If you've ever been in church for any amount of time, you know that usually the guy that is credited with writing it is Solomon. He wrote most of it. Solomon is actually identified as the wisest guy in the Bible. So he's got a little something to say about wisdom. And so Proverbs 8, where we're at, what's happening is there is this personification of wisdom happening. The whole chapter is written as this personification of wisdom. So everything speaking is speaking as if wisdom herself is talking. And I say herself because it's described in the feminine. I'm just going to, the whole chapter's like that. You need to read the whole thing. But like I said, for time's sake, I'm just going to jump to verse 22 and 23. And we're going to roll with it. So verse 22, and this is wisdom talking. It says, the Lord brought me forth as the first of his works, before his deeds of old. I was formed long ages ago at the very beginning when the world came to be. And so in this passage, we see that divine wisdom was actually at the beginning of everything with God. right? Not only was it with God, if you kind of read on down, it was actually there crafting everything with God before anything was everything. It kind of later down, it talks about how wisdom, God through wisdom set the borders of the sea, set the horizon, put the clouds where it is. So it's this characteristic of God. And through wisdom, God brought forth everything. It was the divine reason and structure that brought chaos into an ordered universe. And so this was actually an idea that was developed throughout the centuries. And by the time we get to the early church and the writing of the New Testament, this idea of wisdom and divine reason kind of creating thing, even from a secular perspective, was talked about, blogged about, YouTubed about, podcasted, like the whole thing. People understood like this was kind of the framework we're working with. And one of the earliest accounts was this ancient Greek philosopher named Heraclitus. Everybody say that, Heraclitus. Heraclitus was a guy who lived in the city of what would become Ephesus, and he lived about 500 BC. Now, Heraclitus was important because he termed a word for this idea that was already kind of going around. He termed the word logos, and he defined it as this unforeseen force through which everything was created. So he's kind of important because he put that word to an idea that was already out there. And to Heraclitus, this was something that we couldn't know. This was unknowable by man. So we fast forward over half a millennium of people like Socrates and Plato kind of expounding on this idea. This word and idea of logos became kind of a common part of just Greek and Roman philosophy. Like this is just how their worldview was structured. Anybody would have understood what logos meant when you talked to it. This was street talk, okay? So by the time we arrive at the end of the first century, John, who is writing his gospel, would have understood that what anyone meant when they used that term logos. And so listen to what John says to open up his gospel. He says this, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that has been made." Now, if you've read John, you know that John kind of reveals throughout the rest of his gospel, the word he's referring to is Jesus. And here's where John gets a little sneaky John. Because he's very intentional about calling Jesus the Word. Because where we read Word, that original audience would have read Logos. So this is where it gets good. Because John writes his gospel in the city of Ephesus. Okay? Now remember, this is the same place that the word and idea around Logos was originally developed way back 600 years earlier by that Heraclitus dude. So John, when he uses this word in his gospel to open it up, he is deliberately and intentionally giving a name to this idea of logos. John is saying to his audience, hey, you know that everything exists because of logos. You know that everything came to be through this divine wisdom. You thought it couldn't be known. You thought it was beyond our understanding, but in fact, we can know logos. We can actually have a relationship with Logos itself because Logos' real name is Jesus. This is where John opens up his gospel with. Paul later identifies Jesus in a similar way. I told you, we're going to go through a little bit of scripture real fast. 1 Corinthians 1:24, it says, "But to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God, and the wisdom of God." So Jesus is the wisdom of God to us. And if you keep reading John, you know that John declares that this Logos is the true light of the world. And not only can we know Logos, but we can, what was thought to be unknowable, but we can actually be loved by Logos as a son or a daughter. Proverbs 9:10, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." So the foundation of wisdom is knowing him. That's where we start. You can't walk in kingdom wisdom until you're in a relationship with the King of Wisdom, okay? Because that's where it starts. Kingdom wisdom always leads back to intimacy with the Father. So the question really is not what is kingdom wisdom, but who is wisdom? And now that we know who he is, how do we walk in that? How do we bring kingdom wisdom into our lives? How do we bring that into our jobs, our relationships, our worldviews, our perspectives? How do we walk in kingdom wisdom? Because kingdom wisdom operates differently. It values differently. 1 Corinthians 3:19, "For the wisdom of this world is foolishness in God's sight. So when you have an encounter with wisdom, and it's an encounter thing because Jesus is the wisdom of God, from God to us, you encounter a person, you don't memorize it. An encounter with kingdom wisdom will rearrange what you value. It will rearrange how you see things. It will rearrange how we look for solutions. Kingdom wisdom gives us his perspective. How many of you know if we're going to get his perspective, that means our perspective has to change, okay? His doesn't change for us. We change for him. There's this example of an instant where Jesus is teaching his wisdom, and it absolutely required a shifting of perspective from the people he was talking to. And I want to read this one in particular because it just kind of represents a lot of how Jesus taught his wisdom, how it comes to teach us sometimes. And so a lot of the other stories you read about Jesus teaching or doing something, they kind of feel similar. And so the passage is in Luke 14. And I'll be honest, I've always struggled. This is one of those passages I just kind of have struggled with as far as like, what in the world are you talking about, Jesus? Like, because what he's saying doesn't seem to make any sense. Anybody else ever read something that Jesus said and you're like, what? What does that mean for me? Like, I don't even. So in Luke, Jesus is teaching and giving us a little insight to how his wisdom operates. And he says this, he says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, such a person cannot follow me. Like, wow, Jesus, that is super intense, bro. Like, you got to just see Peter in the corner and he's like, hey man, is he eating today? Has he been to the mountain lately? I know he likes to go to the mountain. Maybe we should just give him a break for a second. Because it seemed a little bit off-putting from how Jesus normally operated. It's kind of one of those passages you skip over if you're like studying with somebody, and you're like, and it says right here, if anyone comes and does not hate his father, you know what? Let's just skip ahead to John. I think we get the gist of it, for God so loved the world, and we kind of move past it. I think it's naturally confusing because, like, Jesus, you said to love my neighbor as myself, right? Yeah. You created the family. You blessed it. So you're telling me I have to hate my family or I can't follow you. What does that mean? How does this wisdom make sense? And not only does it sound weird to us, but if we can contextualize it just a little bit for the people he was talking to, it must have sounded so insane because this would have been so far against any kind of conventional wisdom that these people would have grown up with. It would have blown their entire framework for how they viewed the world because he's talking to a group of people who lived in a society that's like actually built on the family. Like the economy is built on the family. The ancestral religion and traditions were built on the family. Like the family unit was everything. So hearing this from Jesus would have been like, this goes against everything I know. And Jesus said all sorts of things like this that would have made like zero sense to the people he was talking to. But he was trying to show us how his wisdom values things, right? For example, so like he said other things to this culture too, like in a culture that valued honor and tried to avoid like shame and humiliation at any cost. Jesus said stuff like, those who humble themselves will be praised. In a culture that was like valued fairness and eye for an eye type stuff, Jesus was like, hey, pray for those who mistreat you. Bless those who curse you. And you can go on and on. Jesus' wisdom went against the wisdom of the moral teachers. It went against the wisdom of the economists. It went against the wisdom of like political leaders. So how do we follow wisdom like that? Because if I'm being honest, like this thing is hard for me to track sometimes. Like what you said over here in this season, Lord, I'm now in this season, and it seems to contradict that season. So how do I bring what you said there? How do I trust you in this? How am I making wise decisions in you? Because it seems a little contradictory. Like, Jesus, what's the formula? Like, I need a formula for this thing. How do I know what is wise or not? How do I walk in your wisdom? Because it seems to change sometimes from what you said last time. And this is kind of where I feel like the Lord wants to like show us about his wisdom. Kingdom wisdom is not a formula thing. It's a follow thing. It's not a book on a shelf to pick up when you need it. It's not a podcast to flip to or a sermon to flip to when you need it. It's a following thing. And I think about like the disciples and Jesus' interaction with them. Like he walked with these dudes for these 12 guys. And the whole time, the purpose of him walking with them was he was training them for whenever he was going to leave. He was equipping them. He was training them. So they were actively being trained as they followed Jesus. And he took them places and he said things like this that would intentionally kind of rearrange their values, shift their perspectives because he wanted to prepare them for something so that he could train them in the way of his wisdom. And that's what Jesus is doing here in Luke. He is training the disciples and now us. And what his wisdom trains us to do is to listen and respond to the Father's voice only. That's the point. It's not that Jesus hates family. It's not that Jesus is anti-economic practicality. It's not that Jesus is against traditions. It's that he wants us to trust whatever he says so much that even if it doesn't make sense, we follow. Yeah. And if he gave us a formula, we wouldn't ask him next time. Wow. Like if he gave us a formula, the next time we get here, we would just pull the formula out. Right? And he wants us to trust what he's saying. He's wanting to ask and be able to speak into the situation. And if we had a formula every time, eventually we would just trust the system more than the source. Okay, I have a stepdad, and his name is Sean. Sean is the quintessential Southern's guy, if I could put it nicely. Like cut off jeans here with the boots and the tube socks high, like before this was okay to do, okay? Like you could get away with it because you kind of have that hipster grungy vibe in Savannah right now, but this dude's been doing it since the 80s. Like hasn't changed, won't change, like Sean is Sean. And if you want to know somebody who's authentically themselves, no matter if they're talking to a president or the guy at the mechanic shop, like I'll let you meet him because this dude is him all the time. Sean is crazy talented when it comes to like the typical guy stuff that you think of. You know what I'm talking about? Like hunting, fishing, like building literally anything. Dude is a crazy mechanic. I've literally seen him build an entire car. Like there was no frame. He welded the frame, put the motor in, and then he won races in the car. Like this is what he does. Like he's just 100% good at anything he does with his hands. And he tries so hard to teach me some things. Like he tried so hard. And I know that it had to be frustrating. But I am just like my dad. He's here. God bless him. But he's not handy. And he passed... Hey, hold on. He passed that gene straight down to me. I think it actually caught a little momentum on its way to me because I can't do it, and he made me do stuff like this all the time. And here's the thing about Sean. Any activity we did was sketchy. He did nothing by the book. There was no book. If there was a book, it was burned when he was born. Nothing. I mean, nothing was the same. It didn't matter. Hunting, fishing, racing, like everything we did terrified me as a kid. I'm not playing. If my mom was here, she'd be able to vouch. I'm not being dramatic. Sometimes I'm dramatic. This is not one of those times. If you're a hunter in here and you've been hunting, I promise you I had a different hunting experience than you did. Or if you went fishing, I promise I had a different fishing story. Like I used to watch the Outdoor Channel and be like, man, that looks so nice. Like these guys are hunting in a tent. I'm like, that looks so amazing because that was not my experience at all. And so no experience was the same or ever repeated with him. That's probably part of the reason why I don't remember anything. Because if I figured it out one time in this season or in this thing, then when I came over here to do the same thing again, it would be different. Only Sean knew what to do in the situation. And so here's what I had to learn how to do. If Sean told me to do something, I had to trust what he said because I didn't know what I was doing, and I knew it was never going to be the same as we did it the last time. And if he told me to nail something, I nailed it there. If he told me to put something over here, I put it there because I trusted he knew what needed to be done. I trusted that he was the authority on whatever situation we were in, most likely because he created the situation, but I had to trust that he knew what was happening. I had no formula with him. I just had to follow what he was telling me to do. If we look back at Proverbs 9:10, This is where the thing like starts to saturate our lives a little bit. Remember that the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. When we fear God, we are putting him in his rightful place. It is a reverence and awe because we've seen his character. We've seen who he is. And so now he's in a correct position in our hearts. He's on the throne. When we get to that place of awe and reverence, and he asks us to do something, what do we do? What do we do? If God asks you to do something, what do you do? This crowd participation. You do it. Yes, you follow his instruction. He knows you wouldn't follow him if you didn't trust him. And you wouldn't trust him if you didn't know him. And so it all starts what we talked about at the beginning about knowing wisdom himself and trusting his voice only so that we follow in the footsteps of kingdom wisdom. We have to trust that he's the authority on the situation and then follow his leading. Here's what kingdom wisdom is not. Here's the kingdom flip. Anytime you read something, you think you got it, there's always a kingdom flip about it. Walking in kingdom wisdom is not about us getting wiser. It's about following so close to wisdom himself that you can't hear or see anything else. It'll just happen to look like you're wise to the people around you. But what they are actually experiencing is the kingdom, is the wisdom of heaven breaking through in our lives. And so this is how, you meet him, you see him, like you're mesmerized by who he is. You put him in his rightful place. You fear him because he is awesome and mysterious, and you can't do anything else once you see him. And he starts walking, and you stay like right here close to him. And then he tells you to do something. Hey, come this way. Okay, I trust you. Take this job. It looks a little different than what my parents told me I needed to be looking for, like coming out of college, but I trust you. Quit what you're doing. Move here. Ooh, there ain't no jobs in my field. I don't know. I got 2 kids. I don't, but in case somebody in here does. But I trust you. Call your dad. It's been a while. Okay, I trust you. You need to give that away. Ooh, I trust you. I want you to start this. I'm not qualified. I've seen other people who've done it. I didn't have the same background that they did, but I trust you. I trust you. I trust you. And we will look back and people will point at our lives and the decisions we made and go, whoa, how did you know to start that? How did you know to go there? Everybody else said go the other way. How did you? Bro, you are so wise. Wow. And when people say that, we'll just look up because that won't even have occurred to us because I didn't do anything. I was just following close. I was just staring at him the whole time, and he was just walking. And the Lord really had to work this in my life because I kind of had this thing all messed up, backwards. I was looking for wisdom, and I was asking for wisdom, and what I thought that meant was learning enough so people would trust what I said. And the Lord was trying to get me to understand that he needed people to trust what he said. Not what I say. I've stayed silent at so many small groups because I didn't think I had anything wise to say. I would listen and I wouldn't say a word the entire time because I would just be trying to think of that one-liner that was going to like wreck somebody's entire life. You know what I'm saying? And I would literally, can I be vulnerable? I would literally sit in a small group setting or at a one-on-one, and the whole time people were talking, I would just be thinking, trying to have some ready to go. You know what I'm saying? Like from a podcast I heard, from a sermon I heard, and I would just be waiting for just a time where I could throw it in and it would make sense. Is that too much? Is that a little too vulnerable?
No, that's perfect.
Every now and then I would get one to land. You know what I'm saying? Like I would walk away. I landed it. I was like, that was good. And I would walk away and I'd be like, Lord, did you hear that? You heard what I told them? That was crazy, wasn't it? I could just see God. And he's like, oh, buddy. Like, yeah, you gave him a zinger, didn't you? Like, now come over here. Just follow me over here. That was so good. And I would walk away, follow him because I thought, I was feeling good about myself. And I thought it was the one-liner that made him proud. But the Lord in his gentle way was trying to show me that actually it was the obedience. It was the following. It was the trusting his voice that he was proud of. And so I had all this pressure that I would put on myself that was never mine to carry. And I wasn't even conscious of me doing that. I had just somewhere along the way, like what I was taught or just kind of my experience had kind of confirmed like that wisdom was something to be memorized. It was something to be earned through study or life experience. Like if I didn't know all the theological theories and doctrines and church history, or if I didn't have some crazy prophetic word for somebody, then I couldn't be wise. I hadn't made it there yet. And I didn't think I could walk in kingdom wisdom until like I leveled up in my faith, until I'd reached like this certain criteria. But the thing the Lord wants us to realize is that we can all, everybody say all, walk in his wisdom no matter where you are, because his wisdom isn't about you or me, it's about him. So it's not on you. It's not on me. And it's easy to miss that because a lot of times what gets praised here on earth is the people that are skilled debaters, like the people who argue well and have like photographic memories and things like that. And there's a place for that. There's a gifting for that. I'm actually a big champion for like, I think we should all be learning how to think about God on a deeper level. And so I'm not downing those things. I just want us to know it's not what qualifies us to be wise. He qualifies us. And kingdom wisdom is often identified over a lifetime of following really close, not in those couple of moments where I said something really smart. And so why is this important for us? Adam, you can come back up, bro. I'm on my way to land this thing. So why is this important for us? The Father is looking for a place and a people who trust him no matter what anything or anyone else says, so that he can rest his wisdom on them. Because there's a culture full of people asking questions. And God is wanting to build a church who can provide kingdom wisdom answers and solutions that point people back to him. Yeah. Like, could you imagine a local church full of his kingdom wisdom in a city like Savannah? God wants to make heaven a reality here. That's what he said in his word through Jesus. That's not something we have to guess about, like it's there. He wants to restore the things that are broken. And he always uses broken things, shout out to us, to bring restoration. It's only the goodness of God, it's only the grace of God that could do something like that in our lives. And kingdom wisdom is not just important in God's plan to restore everything as it is on earth as it is in heaven. It's essential. Proverbs 24 says, by wisdom, a house is built. We just got to remember it's not our wisdom. It's his. So his wisdom breaking through our lives does the same thing his wisdom does, because if we're walking in kingdom wisdom, then it's his. Does that make sense? What did God's wisdom do at the beginning? It created things the way the Lord wanted them. Remember, it was with God in the beginning. Wisdom was with God in the beginning, setting the borders, putting in the horizons, creating, building the whole thing. It's the same thing when we allow kingdom wisdom through our lives. It puts back everything the way the Lord wants. And I just want to take some pressure off of us. So hopefully this will encourage us with this verse before we close. James 1-5 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. We don't have to do what I was doing and like conjure something up. We don't have to force wisdom. We just have to ask. And when you ask, he gives it generously. Yeah. Isn't that incredible? And he doesn't find fault when he does it. When I first read that, I didn't know, what does that have to do with wisdom? Finding fault. He gives generously without finding fault. But then I remembered wisdom isn't a thing, it's a person. He can give wisdom without finding fault because he's just giving us more of himself. And there's no fault in him. Yeah. So good. It has nothing to do with what we do. It has everything to do with who he is. And so what does it look like when you ask him for wisdom, it looks like more of him in your life, more of him in your job, more of him in your relationships, more of him everywhere. It's heaven on earth. And when we get to heaven, it's just more of him everywhere. That's what he's trying to do here, though. But we can get that now if we walk in kingdom wisdom. I'm coming to a close. Last two things. Our world is it's desperately searching for a name for Logos. Maybe that's an individual. Maybe that's us as a church. But if it's you this morning, if you've never, because I want to give us space here. If you've never had an encounter with Logos, if you've never met Jesus, then you don't have to leave here today without an introduction. And if you know that's you, then is it cool if we play a little bit at the end? We're going to close in worship. Adam's going to lead us, but this altar's open. If you know that's you this morning, you know you've never met Jesus, you've never encountered Logos, the divine wisdom for all of us, then don't leave here without coming up here. And it might not even, you might not even know what that means. Our team will lead you through it. So find somebody before you leave. For the rest of us, can we just ask for more of him in our lives? Because I think if we do that, people will just start saying, man, there's a lot of things coming out of that church. There's a lot of things happening at that place. There's some business leaders rising up. There's some political leaders rising up. And the world will start looking to the church to answer the questions and find the solutions that are needed to bring us all back. So let's do that this week. Let's ask for more of him. Let's walk in kingdom wisdom. So can we be committed to partnering with him to bring answers to a culture asking a lot of questions?